Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder we're having a look at a Q&A that was done by BVVD. Now if you don't know who BVVD is, we've talked about him before. He's one of the head developers over at Gaijin Entertainment for War Thunder, and what he does every so often is on the Russian speaking stream he'll just pop on, answer a few questions from the community, and then we as the English speaking community will get a translation, a few days down the line. So what I'm doing here is I'm going over this post from War Thunder Reddit by AJ Daha, who has translated, the questions and answers into English. Now, if there are any discrepancies here, then I'll make sure when the official Q&A comes out to, spot them, talk about them, all of this wonderful stuff. But right now, just understand that this is a Reddit post. There will be a link in the description to it, and there may be some, discrepancies because of obviously language barriers and also, PR speak and things like that throwing it in. We're going to go through some of the ideas that it talks about, and I'll give my opinion on it and what's going on. So the first question is, do you plan to rework the damage model of helicopters? And the answer is, it is difficult. As far as possible, we have already divided the damage model into small modules. Tail separation only simulates the destruction of the body. In the future will be implemented more different animations. So they're going to make more animations for you to die. To be honest, the damage model of the helicopter, it doesn't matter to me. No, that isn't the problem. The problem is fitting them in the game, and what they've done right now is shoehorn them into the game by lowering the SP costs of them and upping the SP costs of their rivals, basically the planes. And if they want to do this, that's completely fine, but because of the nature of how helicopters work, the fact that some of them are not as effective as others, if you compare the Mi-35M to something like the first Soviet helicopter, what you end up with is a situation where they both, depending on what BR that you're fighting at, they cost the same amount of spawn points, but when they have ATGMs equipped. But the actual use for the Mi-35M is a lot higher than, I believe it's the Mi-4 or the Mo-4. I'm not exactly sure which one. The problem is those have comparable SP costs depending on what BR you're fighting at, and that shouldn't be the case. And this means that even though they're taking into account if ATGMs are a modification that you're taking on a helicopter, what has to also be taken into account is how many ATGMs you have. The two issue helicopters right now are the two top ones. So you got the AH-1Z, then you got the Mi-35M. And it's because of the sheer amount of ATGMs they have, on top of the fact that they lowered the SP cost overall for you to get in them. This means that at the start of battles, what happens at top tier is you'll have a player who will either get a cap, get a kill, get out by getting killed or J'ing out, going into a helicopter, sitting on the barriers of the map where nobody can hit them because nobody can get into a plane because you need so much SP cost to get into a plane, and what happens is you get donked on, especially if you're on an open map like Sinai, Fulda, anything like that. If you have some houses and stuff to hide behind, great, but you're going to be stuck there for a while because you won't be able to move. So, yes, the damage model may be a problem, right? There may need to be a bit more refining with it, if you compare the damage model of, let's say, a helicopter, and you compare it to the damage model of one of the light cruisers, like the HMS Enterprise, you can see there's a lot of detail in one of them, and not so much in the other. But that, to me, is not the problem. If you shoot a helicopter, it's going to go down, right? No matter where you hit it. No matter how sophisticated the damage model is, it's going to go down. Has no armor, and the ones that do have armor, not enough to make a difference. The problem is fitting them into the game right now. Instead of hammering them into the game, trying to get them shoehorned in, we're going to have a little bit more of a approach which looks at smaller factors such as amount of ATGMs and power of specific vehicles. And this will only come with time. This will only come with statistics. So hopefully with statistics that'll happen soon. The main feature of the Italian nation will be wheeled vehicles. They will have the maximum number of wheeled armored vehicles among other nations. As for the timing, those who are with us for a long time already know when there will be Italian tanks, an allusion to the fact that all new nations enter into the new year. Well, that could be true. That's not always the case, though. Sometimes we had technically British tank CVT where they released the 4 premium tanks, and that was it. Then we had the French CBT, and then maybe this year we'll have, we'll have the Italian tank CBT. I believe one year as well over Christmas we had the beta for the tanks, or the closed beta, I should say, for the tanks. So it's all possible. Maybe we'll get, the Italians in the next patch. And there is some, there is some thought towards this. Something I do want to bring up is a lot of people have been talking about in the next year that we're going to see the Italians. Well, there's 2 things to think about with this. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but let's have a look at this. So, the first thing is this was posted on the War Thunder 6-year anniversary. It's just a picture of what they want to do going forward, and what they want to do: World War Mode launch, new game nations, new vehicles and locations, and much more. So that's what they're looking at in the future. Now, what it says there is new game nations. Before, they already talked about adding 2 new tech trees / nations to the game. So I'm very, very, very much looking forward to that and seeing what they decide to do. Italy ground is obviously going to be one of them, but are we going to get some other stuff like the Swedish, like the Romanians, like the Hungarians, even maybe some kind of Commonwealth tree? There's so many options to look at, and to be quite honest, it makes me very happy to see that coming. So, yeah, the other thing to think about is last year, and most years in War Thunder, you have 3 updates near the end of the year. So last year we had new ERA, this was the 18th of September, then 1.73, Vive la France, 1st of November 2017, and then La Resistance on 19th of December. So you had pretty much 4 months, not even 4 months really. Like if you go 18th of September, that's nearly a month between them, and then a month and a half. So yeah, it's around about 3 to 4 months between when these things were released. If you look at this year, we've had update 1.81 Valkyries the 19th of September, then the 23rd of October. So within a month of each other. And then you have November, and then you have December. So for me, we are probably going to get update 1.85. If I was going to put money on it, I'd say, yeah, we're going to get update 1.85 before, we hit the new year. What will be interesting to see is if that's the case, or if we'll have to wait. And to be honest, I'm okay with waiting. If as somebody who has really enjoyed the naval stuff so far, grinding out rank 1 and rank 2 of everything, I've really enjoyed playing it. Ship arcade battles, getting the tester stars, getting the decal, playing the British ships, been a lot of fun. Been really, really fun. And I hope that, this fun continues. I don't think I'll personally have a lot of fun in the destroyers, to be honest, but the main thing is, there is a massive swathe of the game now in rank 1 and 2 for ships that I know I can have fun in. And I'm hoping that, that's the case going forward. So, with that said, I would be fine with the Italians to come out later on. Right now, we've had a massive content dump in War Thunder on update 1.83 Masters of the Sea. I think when I checked it, it had over 50 vehicles in it. It obviously has ships going into OBT. There's a lot of stuff to do right now in War Thunder. And compared to the patch before it, the Valkyries, where if you weren't interested in helicopters, the only other stuff to look at was some rank 6 tanks, then, this update was a hell of a lot better than that update. So that's great to see. So because of that, I think if they pushed Italy back into the next year, I wouldn't actually be that annoyed. I know a lot of people would be, but for me, not so much. Something that was brought up during the history videos that I did on Italy was the fact that I didn't mention other vehicles that the Italians used, which were modern vehicles. I know I didn't mention them. If I sat there for, ages mentioning all the vehicles that they used, either modern times or in the last 20 years, it would have taken me ages. The reason to talk about, rank 5 and rank 6 was to give some generalities and then move on to rank 2 and 3 and rank 1. So if people miss that point, fair enough, but it isn't a lack of knowledge on my part, it's a lack of I don't care, I'm going to move on. Rank 5 and 6 in most nations really don't entice me. Maybe low rank 5, but when we're talking about rank 6, I'm not interested, so I'm not really going to talk about it. But if you want to ask me about what vehicles they used, yes, I will talk about it with you because I have researched them. But bringing them up in a video, when I'm talking about generalities for rank 5 or 6, it's pointless. It really is. Anyway, wheeled armoured vehicles. Obviously, Italy should have some at the rank 5 and 6 era, but I am going to talk about rank 1, 2, and 3. Because that is what I am interested in. There are a bunch of armoured cars that Italy could have. It depends where I suppose you draw the line for armoured cars or, wheeled vehicles. There was a few trucks, like we talked about in that video, the Semovente 90, was it the 53, which was a tank destroyer, which was on the platform, I believe, of the M1441. And what this machine was, it was just a gun platform for the 90. Now, there was already a gun platform for the 90. It was a truck. And it was a flatbed truck. It wasn't very fast. Very much in the same vein as what you'd see from the 29K or something like that. And there are a bunch of those out there. There's also a few, like, little cars or little trucks which do have quite large guns on them, so it would be nice to see them. Are they going to overtake everything? Well, it seems like they're going to be a mainstay of the Italian tanks. I mean, it's kind of funny that the Italian tanks are not going to be a mainstay of the Italian tanks. We're looking more as more of an idea that we're going to see more wheeled armoured vehicles, so that'll be what would you say? That would be the catch to Italy. With Britain, one of the big catches for later tiers was stabilization and, high velocity APDS. With the Germans, it's a little bit of a bag of all tricks. Same with the Soviets, but I suppose the Soviets, you could say more about armor and speed combined. And then the Americans, once again, jack of all trades. Then, if you look at the Japanese, lightly armed vehicles, a lot of HE in their shells, can do a lot of damage. Then the French, awful rank 1, but I suppose their emphasis would be light tanks, stuff which is lightly armoured, apart from something like the 75 Jumbo, which is American. But yeah, lightly armoured stuff with OK guns, which do a lot of damage with their AP. Focus on scouts, which was nice. So you can see that every nation has some kind of tick to it. It has something to trying to get people enticed into it, if it's a minor nation. And Italy in the game would be seen as a minor nation. By the way, as a point going forward, when I say minor nation, what I'm referring to is the amount of people that play each nation. So there's a big gap. So you have the three major nations. You got the Soviets, the German, and the Americans. These three nations are the most popular. You could even put it down to just American and German, but, the USSR is very much a close second, so those are grouped into three. The other nations are what I personally class as minor nations, because they are not as played as much as the other nations, and therefore can hardly ever form their own team on one side of the battlefield. So that would be the UK, France, Japan, Italy. So that's the way I see it. Anyway, we will have T-72, of course. This is one of the most warring tanks in the world. I'm guessing that means it's been in the most battles or in the most wars. What will be the differences between the T-64 and T-72 in-game? In general, the T-72 will have the best armor. Now, this was an interesting thought, because I've talked to some of my mates. Now, you know me. I'm not that interested in modern stuff, but I do have a lot of mates who are. A lot of them who are either in the army, ex-army, or are just really good at digging up stuff. And the way that the T-72 was always described to me, and the way I always read about it, was never had the best armor. Now, if we're talking about a variant which is more modern, yeah, maybe. It has I believe it's Texelite, which is something, is it Texelite? It's something like that. Basically, the T-80 already has it in game, so does the T-64 in certain ways. So it already has, it on it. It should have pretty decent armor on it, but getting it described as better armor than the T-64 is a weird one. And it's either a weird mistranslation or either a lazy translation where there's some context missing here, or they've decided to go for a much more modernized model. And why do I say this? So let's go through it. This is just some notes that I made while I was talking to a few people. So just so you guys can kind of understand where they're coming from. So the T-64. The T-64 was designed at 1963 and produced in 1963. Obviously designed before that. Around about 1963, the main thing that the Americans have at the time is the M60. So the Americans with the M60, they were seen as having a pretty good tank, to be honest, and the Soviets had to do something to counter it, or had to come up with something which would be as equal as it. So they came along with the T-64. The T-64 is an interesting machine. In War Thunder, it's known for being slow, having a good gun, and having decent armor. Well, the T-64, in real life, I think you could see it much more as a prototype of what was to come. Now, in the new modernization push in, the USSR at the time, they needed some kind of testbed vehicle to try some interesting ideas and also to modernize as well. And that, to me, is how I see the T-64. You've got a tank, which the Americans, as I said, have the M60. They're working on stuff like the M60A1 at the time. And because of this, you need a vehicle which can deal with it and also is future-proof. Now, the T-64, what they did is they added a bunch of different ideas onto it. The new gun, the auto-loading system, the three-man crew, the new armor, all of these weird and wonderful things. And certain things worked and certain things didn't. I think that's pretty safe to say. Reliability was quite a large problem with the T-64. The fact that the autoloader was powered by the engine probably isn't the best thing. There is also certain weak spots in the armor. You've also got the problem of the actual autoloader itself. It's quite easy to pop when you look at it. Also, reliability issues with the engines. So what came along after the T-64? Well, the T-72. And the T-72 was made, or at least produced in 1972. The best way to see this machine is it's a consumer variant. And what does this mean? Well, it took all of the best parts of the T-64 and it put them together and was used to kind of give to other nations to make it so they could have their own style MBT and they could build off of it. If you look at the most recent Iraqi tank, or at least if you look at a lot of those Middle Eastern countries, their new MBTs or their MBTs from the last 20 years look very, very similar to T-72s, and there's a reason for that. The T-72 was the main export version. It was used to give to people to kind of bring them up to standard, while also being used as something which was able to learn a lot from the T-64s and also the vehicles before it. So what they did was they increased the reliability of it, which was a big issue with the T-64. There was even reports of the T-64 where its barrel would crack, after shooting, and all of these weird things that would happen. So the T-72, they improved on all of that. And also, they improved, obviously, the feasibility of this. So this means the economical side of it, also the usefulness in battle. Big issue with the T-64. Couldn't really go backwards, didn't have a lot of speed. The T-72 still struggles with the reverse bit, but it has okay speed behind it. You've basically taken a T-64, and we're talking about the early versions of the T-72 here. You've taken a T-64, up-engined it, lowered the armor a little bit, and also kept the three-man crew and put a different autoloader in it compared to the T-64. So those are the main differences between the two tanks. What is interesting, though, is it was seen at the time, because you've got to remember, these things were designed to fight M60s. So the M60 AOS would be around the time of the T-72. The armor was dropped from the T-64 to the T-72 because it was surplus to requirement. So the T-72, even though it had less armor than the T-64, was still fine for the time. The problem is in game, it doesn't fight M60 AOSs, and it won't fight them, and this is the major issue. So, and this is the problem with balancing in general, the historical side of everything. But yeah, for the time in history, the T-72 would be fighting M60 AOSs, and it would be fine. It would be able to deal with them without any issue when it comes to the armor, which is why they lowered the armor from the T-64. Now the T-80 rocks out with its cock out. It is a refined version of the T-64 and the T-72. They basically locked in with the T-80 what they wanted to do for the next 10 years. Their plans personally for what they wanted to do. And what this means is that the T-80 in general is much more future-proofed than the T-72 and the T-64. It was made afterwards, 1976 produced. I also believe it went into service the same year. But with this said, it was designed to be something that they would build on from an armed forces point of view. That's why you still see them used today. Even though they're very different to the early variants, the general test bed or the general chassis and idea is the same, and that is because it was refined from ideas of the T-64 and T-72. So a lot of people are saying the T-72 is better than the T-80. I can see the arguments. I get it. But for me, personally, the T-80 should be better than the T-72 on how it plays, just because it should be the more refined version of what the T-72 set out to be. So that is obviously something to think about. Will it come to game? Of course it will. The question is which version of the T-72. The fact that they're saying it will have the best armor, I'm wondering whether they're going to do that by statistics, or whether they're going to do it by angle, or what's going to go on. Because technically it doesn't have the best armor. It has worse armor than the T-64. But as I said, the extra armor that the T-64 had was surplus to requirement for what the T-72 needed at the time. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see which version they pull out. It really is. And if they're going to add in, obviously ERA to it, which one are they going to pick? Because I believe the T-72, depending on which variants, you could have the Contact 1 or the Contact 5. That could be the big upgrade that this thing gets over some of the other machines. So maybe there's that. Who knows? Soon we'll start to receive news about the next update. That's good. It hasn't even been a month yet since the last one, and this is called the Crazy Christmas Period in War Thunder. And what about big ships? So this is something a lot of people have been asking for. As you can see, now the maximum rank of fleet is the 4th rank, and with each increasing rank, the tonnage of ship increases. We are not saying that large ships will not, I think, could be introduced gradually larger ships, but we are still in doubt to make the battleships. Besides the gameplay issues, the battleships were not in every nation, and as a rule were single.